everyone to my channel. I am Leanne, your host for the lovely non-spoiler section and spoiler section of the review for the Sittaford Mystery. If this is your first time to my channel, please sit down and we can talk about it. If you've not been here before, if you've been here before, well, you know the drill. You know how this is going. You know. Okay. So this is the Sittaford Mystery, also known as The Murder at Hazelmoor by Agatha Christie, and it is a standalone. Like a lot of Agatha Christie's books are mystery and standalone. There's the Party Yet series that are, I guess, would be considered like Sherlock Holmes series. What made me read this book? I wanted to see what a female mystery author could write to compare it to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, because I do love Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writing. Okay, don't get me wrong, it's fabulous. I wanted to see if her writing stood up to it. I also want to try Elroy Queen. If you know, you know why I want to try it. Because it's always been compared to Sherlock Holmes by Hattori Haji. You don't know who that is? Well, maybe one day you will learn on this channel or by yourself. And my floof has gone away. I don't know how to get a floof. How do you get a floof? Just floof it up like floof. Floof. There's my floof. I don't know. Okay, so the blurby. The Sittaford Mystery. M-U-R-D-E-R. It began as an innocent parlor game intended to while away the hours on a bitter winter night, with a message that appeared before the amateur occultists spellbound at the Sittaford house was spelled out as loud and clear as a scream. Of course, the notion that they had foretold doom was pure bunk, wasn't it? The discovery of a corpse is pure coincidence, wasn't it? If they're to discover the answer to this baffling murder, perhaps they should play again. But a journey into the spirit world could prove terribly dangerous, especially when the killer is lurking in this. Dun dun dun! It does live up to my expectations. Yes, I could not figure out who the murderer was until the very end. So good job, Agatha Christie. And I have read this book before. I knew who it wasn't, for the most part. But I totally guessed who it wasn't. I thought the one person did it, but he didn't. I was wrong. Totally wrong. The genre is considered to be mystery. What else would be? She's Agatha Christie. She is a popular mystery narrator of all time. In a career that spans over half a century, her name is knit with brilliant deception, ingenious puzzles, and the surprise the unmounted. Originally inventing the modern mystery novel, she has earned her title as the Queen of Crime. So, if you like mysteries but don't want to try reading Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's work, or you don't like his works, then you can try hers. As she's a mystery writer too. And she has a lot of them. Just like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, maybe even more. And they're like pretty good reads. Now technically I listened to this as an audible. So, yeah. It's actually pretty good. Listening to it as audible. The person who spoke it, yes, would have been better if the female characters were more feminine and less masculine, but they were still a pretty good read. And since he was probably British, the reading of this, as it happens in Britain, is very good. Because you can get the British accent very well, and I wouldn't have been able to do it. Yes, but what I mean is, I don't want. Instead of my reading, yes, but what I mean is, I don't want. I'm not British. I say, but I'm not British. I can't read in a British accent in my brain. I wish I could. I wish I could read it in a British accent, but I don't have the brain for that kind of thing. I don't even know what accent I'm trying to speak now, and I'm just trying to speak an accent. Okay. It's a nice put together mystery, and it's very interesting to see from the perspectives of the inspector, but more from the person who actually solves the mystery, which is not the inspector of this book. It's somebody else. She does put a lot of things together, but she doesn't put everything together. There are some things that the inspector learned that she did not, including who 3 of the characters were and their reasonings behind being where they were and what they were doing. So, yeah, there's that. It's also very different from the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's, because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's is told from one perspective, and it's of course Watson's perspective of how he views and listens to and sees Sherlock Holmes' work. And this is where you get many perspectives at one time instead of just one. So you can see how everybody else comes together and thinks about stuff and how they are. So there's that. But anyways, if you guys want to stick around for the other review, you go right ahead. That part is coming up in just a second or two. So if you think those are like I'm reading really love, leave a subscription, drop it down below. I will see you guys in the next episode. And if you want to stay for the rest, be spoiled. Alright, be spoiled. Okay, so to be spoiled, here are the things you need to know. So Sittaford Mansion was built by what's his freaking name? Captain Joseph A. Trevelyan. And for the winter, he decides to let his house, which they call, renting back then, is letting his house to the Willett family because they were searching for a place in Dartmoor that had a lot of rooms and stuff and a lot of servants. But the thing is that Mrs. Willett and her daughter Violet Willett are not actually named Willets. They're there for her husband and Violet Willett's father, who is actually an escaped convict who escaped thanks to the help of a man she fell in love with, which is called Brian Pearson. So Brian Pearson, who is Trevelyan's nephew, who came from New South Wales, Australia, and had fallen in love with Violet and decided to help Violet go break out her father, who did get captured, by the way, because he got turned around. And his name was Fremantle Freddy, and he was a little poo-poo. He was in Dartmoor prison in Princetown, and he did not have a head on his shoulders. So because of that, he was locked up. And so they were trying to free him, but during the time he broke out of prison, fog clouded the area and turned him around, so he didn't end up very far from the prison and was quickly recaptured. Major John Edward Barnaby was the one who killed Captain Trevelyan, and he did it in a unusual way. So because he knew it took forever to get from Sittaford to Hazelmoor, which is where Trevelyan was, he led the assumption for the other people he knew it was going to snow that he couldn't get there except it would take like a couple of hours because he had to walk. And so he concocted a table turning, spelling out Captain Trevelyan is dead, so to scare everybody, and then he decides that he's going to go and commit the murder. Because he wants to keep money that Trevelyan had won in his name at his address. And he wanted it. Because he makes bad investments. And Trevelyan is rich. And he just wants to keep the money so he can get out of this bad investment. So, yeah. There's that. You meet, of course, some people who were at the table turning that were all suspicious. You have Captain Wyatt, who has Abdul, his Indian servant. You have Mr. Rycroft, uncle of Martin Daring. Mrs. Caroline Perchhouse was not there, but her nephew, Ronald Garfield, was. You have Mr. and Mrs. Curtis. These are all people who lived in the Sittaford area because Trevelyan built little cottages on his land in Sittaford and rented them out. And then Duke, who you learn Mr. Duke is actually an investigator, and he very popular ex-investigator that was extremely smart. That the inspector Narracott, who came from Exeter, was using to sound off his theories and everything through. So Inspector Narracott comes down as the one to investigate and everything. But you meet Dr. Warren, doctor who's the investigator who, can estimate things. He's a doctor, not the investigator. So he can do exams and stuff. And he's the one who declares Trevelyan dead, how Trevelyan died, and even gives a rough estimate of the time. Which Major Barnaby, who was there also, sat there in influence saying 25 after 5, right? And the doctor's like, well, yes, it could be 25 after 5. And obviously, since Major Barnaby was looking at his watch, in Sittaford at 25 after 5, obviously, if he died at 25 after 5, Major Barnaby couldn't have been the one who did it. Setting up his alibi, of course. Because of that, instead of Major Barnaby being the one in the line of sight, it was James Pearson, Captain Trevelyan's nephew, who came from London to see his uncle, but found him dead and fled back to London because he was in a panic. His fiancée, who's very much in love with him, Emily Trefusis, an amateur sleuth, goes and actually finds out who the murderer is by finding boots and everything, and goes, oh, I know who the murderer is. Now I can sit there and my fiance out of prison because he didn't do it. He's too much of a chicken. He's a very person. And she was using Charles Enderby, who was a journalist from the Daily Wire and an amateur sleuth as well, to help her figure out everything and investigate and get into places where she normally wouldn't, where only investigators like Inspector Narracott would be able to get into. Such as speaking to Robert Henry Evans, who was Trevelyan's servant, and his wife Rebecca, and trying to find out what she could. Also speaking to Mrs. J. Belling, who was the licensed proprietor of the Three Crowns in Exhampton, where Hazelmore is. Speaking to the Willison and Williamson's estate agencies, the Walters and Kirkwood solicitors. She even was able to use Enderby to get in and speak to Jennifer Gardner, who is Trevelyan's sister, and also Robert Gardner, who was Jennifer's invalid husband, to their maids, to their nurse, to Mr. Decrus, which is James Pearson's solicitor. She even got to speak to Trevelyan's niece, Sylvia Daring, and Martin Daring, Sylvia's husband, who they're both going through a divorce, and nice things. She of course meets Brian Pearson after Enderby finds her. The Brian and Violet having a little love affair meeting. Of course, they're trying to also meet about, her father. But yes, if you want to know how he officially got murdered and how he got there, you would have to read the book or listen to it on Hoopla if you have a library card. If not, you can probably find it on some other Audible device. It's pretty interesting to read or listen to. Okay, so my favorite character was Emily because she was really an amateur sleuth that actually figured out things that Inspector Narracott didn't. But Inspector Narracott knew the Willits weren't the Willits and knew why they were there, as well as the fact of obviously James Pearson was not the one who did the murder, but he had to figure out who it was in the end. My most disliked character was, of course, Barnaby, for offing your friend because you wanted the money. You could just ask him if you could keep the money, or if not borrow the money from him. And like, quit making bad investments, dude. Just because your friend's better than you, smarter than you, and can outpace you in everything, doesn't mean you have to off him. Quit being his friend then. Or quit being so jealous. Just ditch him if you can't stand him. Okay? You're both in the army. You can ditch him. It's okay. What's so memorable was how quick Emily's mind worked. Like, she literally found the missing piece to the puzzle, and she sat on it for a second. And it was like, but what if? And goes and looks, and it is. And she goes and says, this is it. I solved it. So, her mind works pretty quick. Mine didn't. I was like, what about these boots? What about this? What about that? It doesn't make sense, okay? My favorite passage from the story is, and then, as she straightened her back and stood upright, her eye was caught by the one incongruous touch in this room of apple pie order, a little pile of soot in the ground. And that's what got her on the foot with solving the crime. And who did it? All because of a pile of soot in a grate? How can you figure shit out like that? Don't look at me like that, Kiki. My favorite quote is, if you will have it, said Emily, I love Jim. Passionate. Like, literally, she traveled the Hampton to Exeter to, where else? The Laurels to Hazelmore. Everywhere. She went everywhere to find out what she could, just so she could sit there and clear her fiance's name. So what I thought about the ending of the book. It was a surprise to learn Major Barnaby killed his friend over some money, but I was glad that Emily still loved her Jim and was not being swayed to end up with Enderby, although she really should have told Enderby that she was just using him. What book did it remind me? Any of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novels, because I haven't really read any other by Agatha Christie. At least I don't remember. This book, as you know, is a standalone. There is no more series to it, but she has a lot of books out, so you can read a lot of them. It is not all set in the same area. Alright, that's a 3.5 because there could have been a little more to it. You could have given us a little more mystery, a little more intrigue. And make it a little less something or another. I don't know. It just didn't feel like a 4 to me, but it didn't feel like a 3. So, if you guys think I deserve a like, comment, or even your lovely subscription, drop it down below. I will see you next illusion.